Now, for today's guest, I actually don't think she needs any introduction to anyone who is pro-life in Ireland. Niamh Uí Bhriain of the Life Institute is a woman who I would describe as being fiercely intelligent, a strong communicator, and is passionate about protecting the unborn and their mothers from abortion. You're very welcome, Niamh, to the show.
Hi, Aoife. Though I don't know how I can possibly live up to that introduction.
I actually could have written an awful lot more, but I said, look, Niamh is a great talker, thank God, and you'll have plenty to say. And I know the listeners will want to listen to more of what you have to say. So, Niamh, I said to you before the show that I always ask the person I'm interviewing how they came to be pro-life. I think I have a fair idea how you did, but I'm probably sure there's bits I don't know about. But I'm sure the listeners will be curious to know how have you come to be such a prominent person in the pro-life world in Ireland?
Well, I suppose my family was always very pro-life, Aoife. But if you thinking back on it, there was nothing extraordinary in how I came to be pro-life. It was very much kind of part of the culture in our home. But I did happen to meet an extraordinary person, and some of your listeners might remember Joe Scheidler of the Pro-Life Action League from Chicago, and he was one of those really extraordinary people, I think, that God sends to the world every now and again. And he was larger than life in every way. He was a big, tall man with a powerful voice and a really big heart, and he devoted his whole life to pro-life activity. And he was one of those people who had great compassion, and he was very involved. Actually, a lot of people might not know this, in the civil rights movement, for example, in America. And there's these great photos of him, marching with the people who walked with Martin Luther King and others, to uphold the civil rights of Black people in America. And then abortion became legal in the US, and he devoted the rest of his life to that cause. And he wrote a very amazing handbook, 99 Ways to Stop Abortion. And he was one of these people who, gave until he could give no more, than kept giving. He was a really extraordinary man. So he was very involved in kind of activism, in being visibly and vocally pro-life in the public square. But he was also massively involved in crisis pregnancy centres, in helping abortionists leave the trade, if you like. And he happened to come and stay in our home when I was young, when I was in my early teens. And he had brought with him, I think, to bring to meetings in Ireland photographs of aborted babies. And at that time in my life, I knew what abortion was, but in a very vague way that you do when you're young, when you're a teenager, a young teenager. And we weren't meant to look at these photos, but kids being kids, you ferret out things your parents don't want you to look at, and you look at them. And I remember still to this day, many years later, how horrifying it was.
And Niamh, what age were you when you saw that picture? Because I have a very similar experience. What age were you, do you know?
Maybe 12 or 13. To be honest, I couldn't.
Yeah.
I have to go back and figure out the age I was then now. But
Yeah,
I
no,
was,
I was actually seven. It's a topic that the way you hear people saying they don't want their children to see pictures, of
yeah.
aborted babies. I actually found one as well. It wasn't deliberate on my parents' part, but I saw one of those pictures. I'll never forget. Still, of the baby. It was quite a large baby now in a bucket, and like it was, discolored and everything. And I just remember basically my thought was, how can adults do this to babies? I'll never forget it. So it sounds like you had a fairly similar start.
Well, it was just so horrifying, and you're
Mm,
correct. It was this new, something that was very new to my understanding of the world, that an adult, precisely as you said, Aoife, could do this to a child. That somebody would deliberately hurt a child, and that would be sanctioned by the law or sanctioned by society, and that was an alarming thought, I think, to
mm,
a teenager. And then in Ireland at the time, of course, we had the Eighth Amendment, and it was before the X case. So you were kind of thinking, well, we don't do that here, thank God, And then
mm.
the X case happened, and the X case was a catalyst then, I suppose, for my being involved in the movement, because we set up Youth Defence at the time, myself and 6 others, and things really just went from there. It became an organisation that was very focused on activism. When we got older, then we went to the Life Institute, and then, as you said, a lot has happened since then. Sadly, the Eighth Amendment was repealed in 2018. Though I say to people always, and we had a great meeting about 4 months after after we lost the Eighth Amendment. And I remember saying to people at that meeting, like, you have to, there are two ways of looking at this. One is that a calamitous thing has happened, like a devastation, because that's what it felt like, Aoife. You're correct. I think the entire pro-life movement and all the thousands of people who worked so hard, like in the 3 years up to that referendum, really, like they just gave it everything they had. They were absolutely remarkable people, and still are. And that we have lost something. And that's horrendous, and it really hurts. And we're not hurting for ourselves. This is nothing, it's not a prideful thing. It's not like, oh, I lost this campaign, I've lost my seat, or, I didn't win a political battle. You'd lost something that epitomized Ireland, like this protection of innocent children. And it was wounding, it was deeply wounding. But the people should also remember how long we held the line.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking particularly of the people who began this in the 70s, Aoife, when they saw the writing on the wall in other countries, and they said, let's enshrine this right into our constitution. Those incredibly visionary kind of people who had this idea to put the Eighth Amendment into the constitution. And so for 35 years, and if you go back to, say, 67 in Britain, where abortion was legalised, or 73, if you kind of take those dates as when Ireland might have changed its laws, maybe for 50 years, like, pro-lifers held the line in Ireland when the rest of the Western world had long fallen to abortion. And in doing so, they saved perhaps 250,000 lives. And that's an incredible achievement. To save one life is an incredible achievement. To have been part of a movement which saved that many for so long is something that, you should carry that pride in that. And the joy in it, the joy that you saved all those lives, was a remarkably powerful thing the pro-life movement did, even if the eighth has now been repealed.
Do you not think, Niamh, there was a slight bit of hypocrisy with the Irish population, in the sense that there was a point where they didn't want to have abortion in Ireland, but they actually wanted to be able, for people to be able to travel, for women to travel for an abortion. They were okay to have it somewhere else, but they didn't really want to have it here. What do you think of that?
I do, but I also would note that abortion rates had gone down a lot before it was repealed. And this was one of these, points that the media never wanted to discuss. They kept insisting it was abortion pills when the facts showed that it actually wasn't. So you had this very marked decline in the number of abortions, probably because people became more aware of the humanity of the baby, also because there were more supports available to women, other factors as well. So I think, yes, people are very capable. We all are. It's unfortunately, a human failing of being able to have this cognitive dissonance where you're like, I don't agree with abortion, but if someone's going to abortion, I'm not going to stop them, or even try to persuade them, or I'm not even going to say that was a bad decision for them to make, or that they should perhaps be helped to make a better decision. But I think people did, I suppose, look at what the culture in England, the culture around abortion, these very alarming abortion rates. I remember in the referendum we were saying 1 in 5. Now it's 1 in 4, or 1 in 4 babies. It's actually gone up again, since 2018. 1 in 4 babies are now being aborted, and the opinion polls show that people were very unhappy with that. Like, they were saying, well, we don't like this culture where a baby is just seeing something that can be discarded for any reason whatsoever. What really broke the culture here in Ireland was the Savita case, in my opinion. There was a large consideration for people, just like what happened in Ohio there. Like, people are saying to me that on the ground in Ohio, very similar arguments were being used. Like, voters were being told, if you make abortion illegal, if you don't, in other words, support this constitutional right to abortion, like, women will be arrested if they have a miscarriage. Women will die because they can't get medical treatment. And that argument is so familiar. I remember here in the run-up to the vote, when the polls began to tighten, like the yes vote was dropping, and the Savita case was brought out front and centre, and pro-life voices were completely silenced in that last week, and women were being told, like, women are going to die if you don't vote yes for repeal. So it's very difficult to overcome that kind of fear tactic, Aoife. When people are being told, like, women are actually going to die. We're going to have a lot more Savitas. I remember Niamh Uí Bhriain saying women are going to die because they've taken the abortion pill at home. They're ordering abortion pills online, and they will die. That it's absolutely so crazy. Like, 4 or 5 years later, now we have the government legalizing or continuing to allow the use of the abortion pill at home without medical supervision. So,
Niamh, I don't know if you're fully aware of this, but this is something we're finding in our centre is that the women are coming in, and even though we tell them, on our scheduling line, we do not provide or refer for abortion, they'll come in, some of them will come in and go, yeah, I know, I was told that. I know, I'm looking for the pills. And, there seems to be in their heads a difference between taking an abortion pill and having an abortion. They
mm,
say things like, I just want to induce a bleed, or I just, so whatever language is being used by the likes of BPAS and all these other abortion providers, it's being downplayed completely. And somehow some of the women are able to say to themselves, it's not really an abortion, it's actually just what they call maybe a bleed or a miscarriage.
yes.
Have you
Yeah,
heard that, or are you
I
experiencing?
well, I have, because I was on
Mm,
before the rally earlier this year. I was on News Talk, and the presenter, I was talking about the number of abortions. The number of abortions had gone up so dramatically,
mm,
and that the figures were horrifying, and that there were all these babies were being aborted. And he took issue with me using the word baby, and he said, "Come on now, before 12 weeks, it's not a baby." And
mm,
I was, in some ways, it's actually astonishing. You're kind of going, do I really
mm,
need to explain to anyone in this day and age that it's a baby? Like, everyone has
mm,
scans, everyone knows about ultrasounds. Everybody, you think these facts are very well known, that the heartbeat begins at 3 weeks, that this is absolutely a human being. And then you kind of come up against this blanket denial. And really, I suppose this is cognitive dissonance too.
mm,
If people want to justify the fact that there are so many abortions now taking place, or for a woman on a very human level, if she wants to take the pill, she wants to be able to tell herself that it's not yet a formed human being. Do you know what I mean? That it's not yet
mm,
real. And then I think that's what happens sometimes when women take the abortion pill. They become incredibly distressed because, of course, what's expelled is very visibly a human being. And it's
mm.
not like this, there was, interestingly, a report issued by the Abortion Rights Campaign, and they quoted some women who were like horrified and unbelievably distressed. They thought it was going to be like, you take a pill, you take another one, it's like Panadols, or
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing now, they weren't their actual words, but they're like,
Well, you see, Niamh, it's more like taking medicine. It's like, people who are used to maybe taking a contraceptive pill or taking a morning after pill, taking a different kind of pill doesn't seem to be as bad, I would say, to anybody than going in and having a surgical procedure,
yes.
you
Yes,
know.
of course, and that's why the shift to medical abortions has been so, like, it's every country is seeing this massive shift to medical abortion, because it's definitely packaged and sold to women in a different way. That
Mm,
it's just taking a pill, you're not kind of undergoing a surgical intervention, and it seems like a more minor matter to women. Then, until very often afterwards, they come to realize that it still has led to the death of their child. That's an inescapable
I
reality.
I wonder, did you see the video that's going around of the testimony of Dr. Bruchalski? He was a former abortionist. I just watched some of it last night, and he was speaking about how he basically got into the whole abortion trade. And he said, basically, you start off and you do the very early abortions.
Mm.
And he was talking about inserting a tube. And at like 5 to 6 weeks, he said, literally, you see a blob. Like that's what he saw, coming out. And then he did a few of them. And he said, bit by bit by bit, his heart got hardened to that being a real baby. So
Mm.
then it skipped on to, okay, now here's a 10 to 12-week baby. And he was like, okay, but did it? The woman wanted it. She didn't want, they were being paid and whatever. It's for the baby. He was surrounded by people who were saying, it's good to do this. So taking that leap to the 10 to 12 weeks and then going a bit further, it's just his heart was getting more and more hardened. So that person who you were speaking to, I don't know what their past, who they were, but there's a hardening of hearts, definitely. I feel anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you could take his experience and apply it to the culture in almost every country in the world where abortion has been legalized. Because the first year, I remember in 2000, when the 2019 figures were released, and it was 6,666 abortions, and people were horrified. I think both by the number and by the quantity. So there was two aspects that people were horrified by there. And now then, the 2 years, 2020, 2021, the numbers were pretty similar. This huge jump in 22 to 8,156 abortions. And people can become used to anything. That is the problem. Though I have to say that I think the massive increase in abortion is still quite shocking to a lot of people, even a lot of people who voted yes. And we have found in Life Institute, I think some of your readers might have seen the billboards that we put up every year, and the billboards simply spell out the number of abortions that have taken place so far. And people do find it shocking. They find it shocking. For example, the newest billboards would say like 34,000 abortions have taken place since 2019, and people find that the scale of it shocking. And it's an amazing story, really. I'm going to tell you now that I was at the Rally for Life this year. And one of the great things about the Rally for Life is all the young people at it. Like, it really does give you hope. I remember the first rally after the referendum, and part of you was a little bit anxious. You were thinking, oh gosh, who's going to come? And and I remember coming into the office that morning very early, and it was just packed with young people. And it was going, oh, thank God, thank God there's a new generation rising up to do things. But one of the young people at the rally this year, this young man, like such a helpful, like an amazing young man, just really getting involved in the organisation and the making the rally run smoothly on the day. And he told me how he came to be involved, and it was from seeing the billboards 2 years ago. And at that stage, it was 13,000 plus abortions, and he said it stopped him in his tracks. Absolutely stopped him in his tracks. And he said, "Oh my gosh!" He said in his mind he hadn't been following it closely, and he thought that abortion had been legalized kind of for rare circumstances.
Yeah.
And this real wake up call to him. And now he's like a really active member of the pro-life movement. He's doing great work with Sandra and others. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. But I think we shouldn't underestimate the power of those cold statistics can have. Yes, people can become more callous. Yes, people can become more indifferent. But we still need to keep reminding people, we were told abortion would be rare, and look at these absolutely horrific numbers.
Well, it's definitely not rare. I can tell you that for a fact. So I remember years ago you used to have the roadshow. Is this even a new project? Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about this one? I know you're saying Sandra Parda is leading that, perhaps, but yeah.
She is. So one of the things, just to go back, I suppose, for a moment to that meeting we had after the referendum, and I remember we all felt kind of so brokenhearted, and we said to each other, okay, we've had our time to grieve. Like, we've grieved, and now we need to get on with things. We need to kind of shake the dust off and decide what we're going to do. And we decided at the meeting that there were really three broad strategies that the pro-life movement needed to undertake. And one was to do something about the media, because the media were the Yes campaign and the referendum. People will remember that. Like, the Yes campaign itself, for all its triumphalism afterwards, as someone who's run a lot of campaigns, they didn't do the best job ever. I remember the Irish Times running an article telling them to get up and get out and do something because the No campaign was stealing the march. But they didn't need it, because they had the media in their pocket, and the media really ran their campaign.
Yeah.
And was their voice. Well, yeah, they didn't have to book ads or book billboards, because they had RTE and the Irish Times and everybody else in their pocket morning, noon, and night. So.
But Niamh, also, they had influencers. They chose specific people, doctors in particular. And as you know, Irish people tend to really listen and trust their doctors. So if you remember, there was those influencers who I think an awful lot of people listened to.
They do. And it was very, very interesting that you raised that, Aoife, because what we saw in the referendum was that the voices of pro-abortion doctors were put front and center again by the media, who are the channel through which these voices are heard. And pro-life doctors and nurses, they didn't want to talk to them. And I remember in particular, and it's in that amazing documentary made by Tim Jackson, Ireland's Fall. If people haven't watched it, it's on Vimeo or Life Institute's website. It's a really, really, really good documentary. He talks about when these pro-life nurses, 150 pro-life nurses and midwives got together, had a press conference, and RTE sent a reporter. She came, she did a news report, and it never appeared on the news that evening. And we were ringing and ringing. When we finally got through to the producer, she said it was because they didn't have a balance, in other words, the pro-abortion nurses to show on the same day, and we were just going, but like you're covering the morning, noon, and night. Anyway, it was just a small example of the kind of problem we're up against in terms of having the voices of pro-life medics heard. But when we said anyway, we have to do something about the media. So and that this was kind of in a wider conflict, that people felt that the media was so, the groupthink of the media was so bad on lots and lots and lots of issues. So Gript Media was set up, and I think it's been an enormous force for good. I think it has potential to like, it's already well established as I think a media voice in Ireland now, offering a different view, challenging the consensus that sadly has become so prevalent in the Irish media across many, many issues. And I think that's a great source of hope. And then we said, that really there needs to be a change in politics in the country. That was so terrible to see, just 15 TDs. Like the no vote is so underrepresented now that only 15 TDs voted no to the abortion law. And I think it's very important that the movement gets behind pro-life TDs and really works hard for them and canvasses for them and helps them get in and helps increase the number of pro-life TDs in the Dáil. And then I suppose the third area is kind of like the frontline services, like yourselves, like Gianna Care, like Every Life Counts, and continuing all of the educational work. And like really key to that is raising up a new generation on this issue. And sometimes, you're in this so long, Aoife, you forget that you're not you're not the young voice of pro-life anymore. Like, we're
Thanks, Niamh. It's true though.
No, I'm talking about myself. I think you're about a decade younger than me.
No, I don't think I'm too far behind you at all, really.
Listen, I'm not one of these people who thinks that I think all voices are very important. I think that was a lesson from the referendum too, that people like to talk to their peers, and there are many generations involved in the discussion. Like, we shouldn't feel that it's entirely up to women, or entirely up to men, or entirely up to young people, or entirely up to old people. That's not true. Everybody, a lot of valuable experience and valuable voices that need to be heard. But you absolutely have to have a new generation of pro-lifers, or the movement dies. Like, that's an absolute truth.
That is true. Yeah,
it's enormously important to have young people involved and to make them, empower them, I think, to make them feel they can be vocal and visible. They're not afraid to speak openly about the issue. And
sorry, just the way you communicate with the young people now. You have Gript Media. Do you have an element there where you focus on TikTok or anything like that? Because the way a lot of young people, they don't read newspapers, they don't look at the news. That could be a good thing in a way, that RTE brigade, that nobody knows them. Like, the younger people don't know who's on RTE anymore. So are you looking at how to reach Gen Z, basically?
Absolutely. So yeah, you're so right. Like, my kids don't have a clue what the Late Show is, any of those shows. They wouldn't they watch those. Yeah. They've no interest in that medium, I think. And
no.
Now, what they are interested in is, as you said, they're TikTok. And funny, because like you and I, Aoife, probably used Facebook a lot, and our kids don't, because they don't want to be on the same platform that their mommy is on.
There's definitely nobody young on Facebook. I haven't seen. I mean, I don't really love Facebook. I'm just on it for the sake of keeping up to date with things. I don't love it. I don't love it at all. No, definitely the younger people don't use Facebook.
No, they're all about TikTok and Snapchat. So you have to, and this is the funny thing. Like, I remember when social media became a thing, and YouTube even before it became a thing, and it was incredible because you were able to bypass media and you were able to get to people with a message. And especially when you live in a country like Ireland, a small country, and you kind of only had RTE and TV3, and then a small collection of national newspapers, and they were all on one side of the abortion issue. And it was, you just felt like you couldn't break through. So it's amazing that is the blessing, if you like, of social media and of the internet, that it does allow you these different channels. But you have to be mindful, like you say, first of all, that a lot of those channels now are really monetized. In other words, they make it difficult for people to see your message unless you're paying for it. So there's a big shift in that in regard to social media. Like, it was embraced by everyone as this kind of free platform. It's still free to be on it, but it's increasingly more difficult to be seen unless you pay for advertising. But still, at least you can. At least it's still open to you as a channel. But so Sandra Part, I know Sandra Part is this amazing young woman who works in Life Institute, and then Megan Scallon and others came together, and they really wanted to kind of reinvigorate young pro-lifers. And they did an audit of colleges and of groups and things like that. And they were just saying there was a lot of people since the referendum had become very demoralized and were not involved and were not kind of actively involved. Going back to Joe Scheidler's message, that you have to be seen in the public square. You have to be seen to be pro-life, to be boldly pro-life. So they were brilliant. And this is all led by the young people who are engaged with their peers, because, like, do I know how to best communicate to an 18-year-old? No, not really. I might think I did, as I've done marketing, but really, their peers know best how to communicate with them. So they started from scratch, really. They got together, they pulled together several large groups of young people. They ran a series of apologetics, if you like training evenings and weekends, but apologetics to bring people through the different arguments, especially now because we're in a different era. Things have changed when we were training people in 2018. And most of all, I think they empowered them. They made them feel unafraid. And that is the most difficult thing in bringing up a new generation of life, because the culture is very hostile now, far more hostile than it was 20 or 30 years ago towards this message. So you're trying to embolden them. You're trying to say to young people, here's all the facts. You've taken you through the arguments. You're very informed in that way. Obviously being informed and knowing what you're talking about is part of empowering you too. But now you have to take the next step. And the next step is either going on social media and talk to people, or going into the public square, like we used to do with the road shows and the street sessions, going into the public square and having the courage, to put your convictions out there and talk to people and listen to their questions and have conversations with them and change their minds and make them realize that what has happened in Ireland has led to this devastating outcome for all of these babies, and also this devastating outcome for women. Because one of the things they said comes across very strongly in their work on the streets and online is that young women are not in a good place in Ireland, right across a lot of many other countries across the world, that you're seeing these increased rates. And this is all, captured in studies and surveys. This is not something that we're casually throwing out there. Increased rates of anxiety, of depression, of loneliness, all of this, and higher rates in young women than in young men. And young women, I think, were promised, weren't they, Aoife, in 2018, that this would be a new Ireland, a better Ireland, an Ireland where women were better respected, where their rights were upheld. And clearly that's not happening. I don't think abortion makes women feel more respected, or makes them feel more loved, or makes them feel more highly regarded. It's very often, let's be honest here, it's very often an easy way out for men who don't want to face up to
I was just going to say that, because I've said this several times in different episodes. What we're finding is women often base whether they're going to keep their baby or not on the reaction of the man in their life. And if he doesn't want the baby, she tends to go for an abortion. And that is just appalling. I mean, you just want men of Ireland to step up and be men, and just stop being so flippant and sleeping around and just taking the easy way out of everything, because the women need support. And I think generally, I think you might know this, Niamh, women, we tend to, when you fall in love, you just, it's a big dream thing, you get into it, and then the men, I don't know, do they react the same way half the time? And they're just on to the next one, and the woman is left broken and, having had an abortion, and they're destroyed,
Yeah.
and there's no talk about the regret side of it. So they don't even know that what they're feeling is maybe linked to what happened, with the abortion.
I think they feel abandoned. I remember one of the rallies before the referendum saying that, when you say you're pro-choice, you're really telling women that they're on their own. That's what you're really saying. You're not actually saying you want to give them a choice. You're really telling them it's all on you.
Yeah.
you're pregnant, as if you had become pregnant because it fell down out of the sky and hit you on the head. You're pregnant. The decision is yours. The aftermath is yours. The regret is yours. Everything is yours. So it's not about giving them a choice. It's about telling them that they're on their own, and that society sees pregnancy as something burdensome, as something that can be got rid of because that best suits the culture we're living in now. And I don't see how that has made women's lives any better. I think it's definitely made life easier for the kind of men who sadly are, to use an old-fashioned word, feckless and careless, and like just don't care. Do you know what I mean? And also, so there are I'm sure there are women who just kind of go, I don't want this baby and don't give this a second thought. But I think it has made things in general more difficult for women. It's a burden that they are now left carrying, instead of people saying, well, how about a society where you're respected, where if an unexpected pregnancy happens, because they always will and always have, we'll wrap our arms around you and look after you and the baby, and we'll support you, and we'll help you raise that child, because a child is a gift. And the
other thing, Niamh, is going even further back the line, what Pure in Heart, for example, are doing, starting at the very start and trying to reach teenagers before they go down the road of whatever, promiscuity or whatever, that they just teach, that to have self-respect for themselves and for others, and, that they are, as precious as diamonds, basically. And, just to change the whole outlook,
There's an English writer, Louise Perry, and she's written very convincingly about this. And she's a woman who, I think after she left college, went to work in a rape crisis centre and then kind of in other women's organisations. And she came to this realisation that maybe the sexual revolution isn't all it was cracked up to be. And in particular, she feels that a lot of the outcomes are hurting women and aren't good for women, and have left women in a more vulnerable position and in a position where they're not doing well, and that it all kind of needs to be rethought. But I suppose the very obvious outcomes are this very rapidly rising abortion rate, and how sad that is. And it's crazy, right? So here you have the situation, Aoife, where voters were told abortion would be rare. Numbers are soaring. Yet the media is giving all the attention to those who are insisting that we should make the situation even worse again. So we've had the absolutely fake, if you like, abortion review, and I'm using that word because I find that it was so disingenuous. You had a review which took place and didn't, for example, look in any great detail about the soaring numbers and how they could be reduced, or how you could make any kind of commentary on them, except for that they'd happened. You didn't have any. It didn't, for example, look at the baby Christopher case in the National Maternity Hospital, where a baby was aborted because the hospital thought there was a diagnosis of trisomy 18 when there wasn't. Like, whether there was or wasn't, it was horrific anyway. But it was an incredible error for the hospital to have made just 3 months after abortion was legalized. There was no investigation by the review into as to what how the culture had changed in maternity hospitals that had led to this decision being made. There was no serious look at really the process at all. It seemed more to me like a vehicle just to call for the law to be expanded. And one of the things they're looking for, and your readers might be aware of this, Aoife, Life Institute is running a campaign to keep the 3-day wait before abortion. And the numbers that have been released to TDs like Carol Nolan show that about at least 1,000 women every year change their minds between the first and the second abortion appointment and don't go ahead with an abortion. So just to explain to people, when you go to the GP first and you have the pregnancy confirmed with a test, you have to wait 3 days before you come back and take the abortion pills. You get 2 abortion pills and you take one then and then one after 24 hours. But what Carol Nolan asked these very important questions, where she asked how many payments were made to GPs for those first visits, and then compare those to the number of abortions that took place. And you can see, like, in the first, when the rates were in about 600 or whatever, or 6,000 abortions, about 800 women had changed their minds in that period, and climbed to about 1,400 for 2021, and then perhaps up to even 2,000 last year, according to the figures that were released. So if we're saying that about 1,000 women changed their minds, it's a very conservative estimate of the women who changed their minds in that 3-day wait. And it's absolutely unbelievable to see the National Women's Council, the Abortion Rights Campaign, the aggressive pro-life TD or pro-abortion TDs try to scrap this 3-day wait using this nonsense argument that it's paternalistic or it shows we don't trust women. But what it does is it gives women time to think. And like, if we scrap that 3-day wait, all we will see is more abortions taking place. That's what that is indicating. We'll just see more abortions taking place. Why would anyone, unless you are an absolute extremist, want more abortions to take place? So if you're listening today and you haven't called your TD, you can check the lifeinstitute.net for information, or you can call us on 01873 0465 to get any information you might need to ring your TDs and tell them they have to keep 3-day wait. It was part of what was promised to voters in 2018. I remember, Aoife, when Simon Coveney was sent out to reassure middle ground voters. He said, he had qualms about this proposal, about the getting rid of the 8th Amendment, but that he'd been reassured that what he called safeguards were going to be put in place. And one of them was this 3-day wait. And it did reassure middle ground voters. They felt that this would be something that would give women time to think. And now this is pushed to have it scrapped. So we need to get calling your TDs. Like this, people don't underestimate the power of the pro-life vote. It doesn't, just because we lost referendum doesn't mean we don't exist. There's still a huge amount of pro-life people out there. They vote, and the TDs need to know that if they scrap the 3-day wait, there will be a penalty from voters for that.
And I think it's important for people to actually realise that the people who give out these abortion pills, these medics, they're actually paid. They're getting taxpayers' money. I think the last figure I remember reading was like something like €450 per client. And I think if they came back or something, it was another extra 100 or something like that. So it's in or around 450, 500 per abortion for a doctor. So it's a kind of a lucrative business for not very much work.
It is. Well, you're certainly not making anyone better, are you? Do you know what I mean? You're ending a baby's life, and it's shocking, I think, that doctors do that. And I know anecdotally from speaking to women and from stories that have been shared with pregnancy counselling organisations, that women really felt they weren't given any counselling. They weren't, up through options. It was just like, are you looking for an abortion? Okay, fine. You have to come back, and here's the pregnancy test, to go back in 3 days then to get the pill. And that it was all this, there wasn't a sense that those who were involved in providing abortion pills were in any way invested in trying to show women that there was a better option or even another option or even another choice. And I think it's really, really, really sad to see that. But definitely, Aoife, as you said, for 150 per abortion, you get paid more for providing an abortion than you do doctors get paid more for providing abortion pills by the state than they do for providing maternal health care to women who are pregnant.
Imagine that. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you've better figures than I have, but the last time I kind of read about this, there was about 11% of GPs were involved in abortion. Is that, am I right on that? Is that changed?
And until now, we don't have any figures that have changed since then. Now, I know there's a huge push on from the government or from the Department of Health to try to get more doctors, try to get more GPs to give out abortion pills. It was like really 90% of them were not giving out abortion pills, maybe 89%, which is very heartening. And I've spoken to a lot of doctors who say, well, actually, it is a conscious decision by these doctors. Maybe some of them voted for repeal, but they don't want to be involved in abortion. I actually saw a poll, I think by one of the medical papers shortly after the referendum, which showed that doctors were less likely than the average person to have voted for repeal. Like, it might have still been something awful like 57%, but it wasn't 66%. I thought that was a little bit heartening. And speaking to like some of the brilliant pro-life doctors we have, like Rona Clearly, Dr. Trevor Hayes, all these amazing doctors, they're saying that conscience obviously is a really important factor too, that people don't want to be involved. They should never be forced to be involved in abortions. There is right now 9 maternity units out of the 19 are not providing abortions, but that is going to change because the Department of Health has invested so much in trying to bring on board obstetricians or practitioners who will be involved in abortion. But again, all I can say is, like, well done to those who held the line and who upheld their right to conscientious objection for so long, because they've spared women, I think, the great distress of being involved in abortion and most likely saved precious babies' lives. There was a very disturbing paper published in the British Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology by researchers from UCC. Your readers have probably heard of this, Aoife, even though Gript was the only national media publication to cover it. And these researchers are pro-abortion. They weren't trying to make a pro-life argument. They talked to doctors in Ireland who are providing late-term abortions, usually for babies who have life-limiting conditions. And it made for very, very harrowing reading. They said that it felt like stabbing the baby in the heart. That was their own words. That's an exact quote. One of them said that they went out in the corridor and was sick afterwards because it was so disturbing to give these little babies this lethal injection into the heart. And these would be, babies that are definitely later than 20 weeks gestation, because these are late-term abortions. They're performing fetus size. And it's going back to what you said earlier, Aoife. How can you, set up that procedure as a doctor, as an obstetrician, and kill that baby, stab that baby in the heart, to use their own words,
There's so many people. I often think of all the people in that whole medical field. Like, let's say the person who comes to collect that, they'll call it now medical waste, I still think we don't know what happens to the remains of the babies. I mean, do we know? I mean, there was this rumor that they were being incinerated. I'm sure they are. So there's the people who do that. There's the people who provide the utensils and equipment. There's, the people who take the booking, the receptionists for doctors who take the bookings for, the abortion. There's so many people now implicated in abortion that weren't in the past. Now, I have a feeling there is quite a few midwives, and I've heard it, that are not at all happy with what they're doing. We may see some leaving, and grand, okay, but we also need good midwives in Ireland to help with babies, being born, the normal everyday births and all that. So our health system is in a mess. And now we have this situation where midwives are being they feel compelled to be involved in these awful abortions. And some of them I'd say, did them and maybe have started realizing, I don't want to be doing this anymore, So I'm praying and I'm hoping that there will be some people soon who will start leaving and speaking out, because it was shocking for me that more GPs, obstetricians and gynecologists didn't stand up back in 2018 and fight against this. There was a small group really who were vocal. So that's one of my prayers.
There was, but definitely I remember that nurses and midwives conference, like they had 150 at it. You didn't have that equivalent on the other side. I think the pro-abortion voices were far more amplified. And I do think you're correct, Aoife. There was kind of a bit of a culture of fear happening there. People felt afraid to stick their heads above the parapet. But the ones who did were extraordinary. And I will be, forever.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant.
The pro-life midwives, and not many of them very senior, and obstetricians who spoke out, and who, of course, were proven 100% to be correct. They were correct about everything that they said. I remember Trevor Hayes giving a wonderful speech at the Rally for Life this year. Dr. Trevor Hayes is an obstetrician, wonderful man, and he spoke about conscientious objection and about the fact that the government would really want to mind themselves when they're trying to push or force doctors or midwives or any healthcare professionals or anyone who's involved at all in the healthcare system, trying to force them or push them to be involved in abortion. And he was saying, like, as you just pointed out, Eve, the healthcare is an absolute crisis. It's the waiting lists are an absurdity. The fact that children with scoliosis and things can't get operations they need is obscene. Maternal healthcare is in crisis. Like, isn't it horrific that we were told the 8th was a magic wand which was going to make women safe, and we're seeing after the 8th was repealed deaths in the maternity hospitals, most likely because they're understaffed and the hospitals are not being given the resources they need to actually make women safe. And Trevor Hayes was making the point that if this healthcare system cannot afford good practitioners leaving because the government is trying to force them into performing abortions.
And I believe that all new obstetricians and gynecologists, I think they will have to be pro-abortion in order to be employed. Do you know more about that?
Now, so Anne-Marie O'Shea, who was the chair of the abortion review, came and spoke at the Oireachtas Committee, and Michael McNamara, who's a TD from Clare, an independent TD, really challenged her on this. And he was saying, are you saying that if an obstetrician or, you know, a medic is saying they don't want to be involved in abortion, that's a barrier to them being employed? And she more or less said it was. And Brendan Crowley and then Ronan Cleary had great pieces on Gript this week, pointing out that was a form of discrimination and would probably end up before the court if you actually put it, your willingness to perform an abortion, if you were unwilling to perform it, that was a barrier to being employed as an obstetrician or as a midwife in the healthcare system, that they felt that was A, was outrageous, B, it was a form of discrimination, and C, they would probably end up before the courts. But isn't it interesting that that's, I think, been the line from the Department of Health really for the last several years, and they seem to have some difficulty in getting the obstetricians and the other staff they need, because the maternity hospitals which had not been providing abortions for that reason because of conscientious objection are still not providing them. Now it might change, but it's still, I think, you know, thank God that they're having difficulty in finding people who are trained to save lives and who are now willing to end them. I thank God for that.
Well, the other thing that we haven't talked about is what they call safe access zones, which is a terrible, what would you say, misnomer. Can you tell us about what's going on there, where people are not allowed to pray outside hospitals that provide abortions or, you know, GP clinics?
Like really all of the talk and the legislation that's being brought forward now on these zones should be called out for what it is. It's just based on malice. It's a desire, a very malicious, I think, petty, corrosive desire to punch down on pro-life people, because there was no other basis for bringing forward these zones at all. And everybody who's pushing them knows that. Mm-hmm. You know, there's a tremendous lie has been peddled for the last 4 years that women need to be protected from pro-lifers, and that's why these zones should be introduced. That's why it's important to say this, Aoife, these zones will criminalize prayer. You will become a criminal. You might be sent to jail, you'll be fined, if you pray or hold a cross or hold a sign saying, "Can I help you?" Even if you pray silently when you're outside or within 100 meters of anyone who's providing an abortion. Now Drew Harris, the Garda Commissioner, was clear about this. He said there wasn't any evidence of intimidation. He said that the current laws were perfectly sufficient to deal with it if anyone was breaching public order. And Gary Kavanagh, who's a colleague of mine on Gript Media, did an extraordinary series of investigations where he really looked into this in depth and he showed the kind of lies that were being told. So, for example, there was this claim that maternity hospitals, women going into maternity hospitals were being intimidated. So he sent in information requests to all of the maternity hospitals, and they told them that actually they had no record. None of them, not one of them, had any records of women being intimidated. You have, for example, in Limerick, women who go to the maternity hospital in twos with their rosary beads in their hands and very, very quietly walk around the outside of the maternity hospitals, praying for everyone, they've told me. So, because the maternity hospital is a unit in the hospital, praying for all mothers who are going into the hospitals and praying for a pro-life outcome for anyone who might be considering an abortion. Like, how can anyone, unless you are so full of spite that you want to criminalize those who have different opinions than you?
I think, Niamh, I think really we know what it is. It's bothering their consciences, really. Isn't that what it is? It's the medics who are performing the abortions. They don't like it particularly. You know, they're going,
It's also politicians who, here's an easy way to score points with my pro-abortion groups and the media who like me if I come out and do radical pro-abortion stuff. And here's also a way like to smack it to the the nice ladies who are saying their rosaries to save unborn babies because we just don't like you and because we can. Like, it's very vindictive. You shouldn't underestimate the malice behind it.
Yeah.
I think the politicians are determined to push it through. So again, it'll probably take a legal challenge to overturn that, in that somebody will be arrested, and that case then will go before the courts. But it's an indication of how vindictive this government actually is, and how these people actually are when it comes to this issue. Like, obviously, there's a whole civil rights, free speech aspects to all of this too. Like, it's an extraordinary.
Yeah,
and you had the Irish Council for Civil Liberties supporting things like these zones. Like, what a joke!
and I think you probably know Isabelle Vaughs Spruce, isn't that her name? Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was arrested for praying in her head.
Yes.
Isn't that correct? I mean, that is bizarre. Obviously she was a known person, as in they recognized her as being a pro-life person. And then the policeman obviously approached and asked, was she praying in her head? I just thought it was ridiculous.
Many people have said it's like George Orwell's thought crime.
Yeah.
Thought police. Like, it's a really extraordinary situation to be in. What's happened in England is that I think the courts have thrown out those cases when they went there. But there's an old saying, Aoife, that the process is the punishment.
Yeah.
It's that being arrested and being dragged through the courts and having to take time off work, and if some people, like the embarrassment of it, everything like that, anyone who's involved in pro-life prayer or pro-life vigils, they tend to be very law-abiding people. Like, they like being arrested.
Yeah, I know.
I don't care if I'm arrested tomorrow. Like, they do. They don't like it. So all these things, the process is the punishment, and also it's a big deterrent. But my admiration knows no bounds for people like Dulair Pro-Life, others, Meet for Life, and those who go with really lovely posters just saying, we can help you, or this doctor performs abortions, wouldn't choose life, things like that.
Yeah.
At surgeries, or who stand, like, as we've talked about, in silent prayer. Like, they're amazing. They're trying to save a life. They're trying to offer women a better option, and it is extraordinary, just absolutely extraordinary, and really telling that they're trying to criminalise that in Ireland. But the good news is that people are willing to challenge it. Just as with Reclaim, you have young people coming forward to kind of take on the banner and lead the way, and as with the 3-day wait campaigns, the rallies, like, the movement, I think has got over. I don't think we've got over the heartbreak, but, like, I think we've realized that you need to keep going, and you have to dust yourself off and carry on. And sadly, that what time does show is how terrible abortion is, and how terrible it is for Ireland, how terrible it is for women and babies. And if you like this, the roles are reversed now, because for 35 years we had campaigners telling us how terrible the eighth was, and they were lying about this, but the harm that it caused. But we can now point to the absolute reality of how terrible this abortion law is, and the terrible outcomes it has produced.
Well, look, Niamh, I know you're pressed for time, and, like, on behalf of everybody listening, I'd really like to thank you and your colleagues. I get a great laugh, is it, out of Ben Scallon when he's asking these really hard questions, and he doesn't give up, with Gript Media. No, you're all doing a brilliant job.
Yeah, they don't like him at all, I don't think.
Oh my God. I'd say when they see him coming, they're like, oh no, what's happening now? He just doesn't give up, I love his style. So congratulations to everybody. Pardon?
Thank you so much. It's been great chatting to you.
No, keep up the good work. And so the things you want people to do is, do you need support in any way from the listeners?
Yeah, well, and I think, like, anyone who'd like to, who has listening, who's younger, or who has a family member who's younger, or a friend, they can get in touch to get involved in Reclaim. Please don't forget to call your TDs about the 3-day wait. Again, you can check it out on the website or call our office, and do everything you can, I think, coming up to Christmas too, to help all the frontline organisations who are doing so much great work trying to have mammies and babies.
Well, thank you very much, Niamh. I really appreciate you coming on today, and I'm sure the listeners will have enjoyed what you had to say today.
Thanks, Aoife. God bless.
God bless.